October 14, 1998, 7:42 a.m. Stage 12, a major studio lot in Burbank. The lights are already hot. They always are by the time he arrives. The crew has been standing for nearly 10 minutes, cables coiled, coffee cooling in paper cups, eyes drifting toward the stage entrance they've watched every morning for years. There is a rhythm to this place, an unspoken choreography everyone knows by heart. First, the assistant director's voice softens. Then the music cue rolls, low, familiar, just loud enough to fill the silence. Then the pause. Just long enough. That pause is the point. The star steps onto the stage. Today that pause doesn't come. The AD calls the scene faster than usual, too fast. The music barely swells before it's cut. The door opens on the cue, not the breath before it. No one gasps, no one reacts, but something slips. You can almost feel it in the room, not tension, not disrespect. Compression. He steps forward anyway, same posture, same tailored jacket, same expression he's practiced into muscle memory over 20 years of arriving exactly this way. On paper, nothing has changed. His name is still first on the call sheet. His contract still guarantees star billing. His parking spot still bears his name in clean white lettering. But the beat is gone. And everyone felt it. Hollywood doesn't announce power shifts, it rehearses them. Walk-on cues are never written into contracts. They don't appear in memos. No executive ever says we're reducing his authority. Instead, the industry uses ritual, small, repeated behaviors that teach everyone how to feel before they think. The pause before a star enters a scene is one of those rituals. It tells the crew when to look up. It tells the co-stars who the emotional center is. It tells the performer themselves how much space they're allowed to take. For years, this star's arrival had been treated like punctuation. A comma before dialogue, a breath before action. Directors waited, cameras settled, the set aligned around him without anyone having to ask. Today the alignment happens without him. He notices it immediately. Not because he's insecure, but because repetition is identity in this town. You arrive the same way long enough and your body expects the world to meet you there. When it doesn't, the absence lands louder than any insult. The director doesn't look up, he's scanning the monitor. The AD doesn't apologize, he just moves on. The crew follows the new tempo without discussion, like musicians adjusting to a conductor who changed the count mid-measure. No confrontation, no explanation. That's how Hollywood prefers it. Because explanations invite arguments, silence invites compliance. Between takes, the star sits in his chair, hands folded, eyes forward. He doesn't ask questions. Asking would turn something procedural into something personal, and personal conflicts get documented. Procedural changes don't. This is how studios test leverage. They don't pull the lead role, they don't slash pay, they shave seconds, they tighten calls, they remove the ceremonial oxygen and wait to see what happens. Will the star correct it? Will he push back? Will he pretend not to notice? Every option reveals something. If he complains, he confirms sensitivity. If he ignores it, he accepts the shift. If he adapts too smoothly, he signals replaceability. The most dangerous response is the quiet one. Because quiet can be mistaken for consent. Across the stage, a younger co-star clocks the change. She doesn't say anything either, but her posture shifts. She steps forward half an inch more than yesterday, not consciously. Instinctively, the room is teaching her something new. This isn't about ego. It's about gravity. Hollywood power doesn't disappear, it redistributes. The star delivers his lines flawlessly. He always does. That's not the question anymore. The question is whether the room still bends around him or whether it has learned to move without waiting. Between scenes, the music cue never comes back. No one brings it up. By lunch, the short call feels normal. That's how fast recalibration happens here. What the star doesn't know yet, what no one has told him, is that this compression isn't punishment, it's measurement. The studio is watching how much narrative weight remains when the ritual is removed. Because something else is happening behind the scenes. Meetings without his name on the agenda, development slates shifting, conversations about packing, availability, and future flexibility. The industry isn't asking whether he's still valuable. It's asking whether he's still necessary. And the answer won't be decided in a boardroom. It will be decided in moments like this. In shortened pauses. In tightened cues. In how long the room waits before moving on. As the afternoon light slants across stage 12, the star rises for another take. No music, no pause, just motion. He steps into the scene anyway. But somewhere between the missing beat and the unbroken silence, a decision is forming, one that won't look like a fight and won't feel like a defeat. It will feel like restraint. And it will change everything. The realization doesn't arrive all at once. It never does. It comes in fragments, small enough to dismiss, frequent enough to accumulate. October 18, 1998, 6:11 p.m. The same studio lot, a different stage, the sun already slipping behind the soundproof walls. He's wrapping early today. That used to be rare. The assistant director checks his watch, nods once and calls it efficient, clean, almost grateful. No one asks if he wants another take. No one lingers for feedback. The machine keeps moving. He walks back toward his trailer along a path he's walked thousands of times. The gravel crunch sounds louder than it should, or maybe he's listening harder now. Power in Hollywood is often mistaken for visibility, billboards, premieres, magazine covers, but real power is friction. It's how many things slow down when you enter a space. Lately, nothing slows. Doors still open, smiles still appear, respect remains intact on the surface. But the micro-delays are gone, the half-second waits, the subtle recentering of rooms around his presence. He remembers when directors used to glance at him before calling action, not for permission exactly but alignment. A check-in, a recognition of shared gravity. Now they look at the monitor. This isn't an insult, it's worse. It's optimization. Studios don't erode authority through confrontation, they do it through efficiency. Efficiency feels neutral, professional, unemotional, that's why it works. You can almost feel the industry whispering, this isn't about you, it's just how things run now. That's the lie. Because efficiency is always selective, some people still get pauses, some arrivals still command space. The question is why his no longer does. The answer isn't performance, the footage is strong. Test screenings are solid, no one doubts his reliability. The answer is leverage. He said no recently. Not loudly, not publicly, but enough. He passed on a sequel the studio wanted fast-tracked, asked for more time on a development deal, declined a promotional schedule that would have locked him into 18 months of constant visibility. Nothing rebellious, just restraint. In Hollywood, restraint reads as resistance. Not because it's hostile, but because it breaks rhythm. The system depends on predictable availability. When a star starts protecting their time, the studio starts measuring how much it needs them to keep moving. That measurement rarely starts with contracts. It starts with cues. By shortening his walk-on, the studio tested something simple. Will the production still flow without centering him? So far, the answer appears to be yes. That's what unsettles him. Because power used to announce itself, in earlier decades, a shift like this would have come with a meeting, a warning, a raised voice behind closed doors, something to push against. Now power hides inside process. It lives in calendars, in revised call times, in who gets looped into which conversations. He notices he's no longer copied on certain early morning emails. Nothing critical, just updates, just planning, but planning is where futures are shaped. On set, younger actors begin to fill the silence he once occupied, not out of disrespect, out of permission. The room has learned a new tempo and people are adjusting to it instinctively. He can feel the pressure building, not to perform better but to reassert presence, to remind everyone why the pause existed in the first place. That temptation is dangerous. Hollywood loves nothing more than a star trying to reclaim gravity. It reads as insecurity, as clinging, as proof that the compression worked. So he does something unexpected. He doesn't push back. He doesn't demand his cue. He begins to step away. Not visibly, not dramatically, but strategically. He shortens his own availability, leaves earlier, takes fewer meetings, stops chasing the room's attention and starts observing it instead. This is not surrender. It's reconnaissance. He starts to see the system clearly now, how much of his authority was never about talent and how much was about habit. The industry had been orbiting him because it always had. Once habit weakened, gravity became negotiable. And that's when the thought forms, quiet, steady, irreversible. What if control doesn't come from being constantly present, but from choosing when not to be? The idea feels radical in a town that equates absence with irrelevance. But there's a difference between disappearing and pausing. Disappearing lets the system replace you. Pausing forces it to adjust. As production wraps for the week, the shortened queue remains. No one restores it, no one mentions it. But something else has changed now. The studio expected adaptation. What it didn't expect was distance. And distance in Hollywood can be far more disruptive than defiance. Because when a star stops chasing the room's rhythm, the room has to decide whether to wait or move on without them. That decision is already in motion. And the consequences will reach far beyond a single stage, a missing beat, or a shortened pause. They will reshape careers. November 3, 1998, 9:26 a.m. A conference room 3 floors above the lot. No windows, fluorescent light, a long table already half empty. His chair is still there. Unused. The meeting starts anyway. That alone would have been unthinkable a few years ago, not because he demanded it, but because the meeting didn't make sense without him. Today it does, or at least the studio wants to see if it can. This is what a career pause looks like from the inside. Not a press announcement. Not a sabbatical interview. Just absence. Deliberate, measured, quiet. He has declined 2 development lunches this week, pushed a script read to next quarter, asked his agent to slow responses, not stop them, just stretch the timeline enough to be felt. The industry notices immediately. Hollywood is hypersensitive to rhythm. When someone who used to move fast begins to move slowly, the system panics, not outwardly but structurally. Schedules wobble, backup names surface, contingency plans quietly activate. But something else happens too. The pressure reverses. Executives begin asking different questions, not how do we use him, but what happens if he doesn't come back on our terms. That's leverage. Not dominance, not demands. Restraint. On set, the shortened walk-on cue remains, but it matters less now. The star is no longer measuring his worth in seconds of silence. He's measuring the studio's response to his absence. And the response is telling. Calls come in from producers he hasn't heard from in years, not offers, check-ins, casual inquiries disguised as friendly curiosity. Just wanted to see how you're feeling. Making sure everything's good on your end. No rush, of course. There is always a rush. The emotional weight of this moment isn't pride, it's tension, because pausing a career in Hollywood is dangerous. The town has a long memory for hesitation and a short tolerance for uncertainty. If the pause lasts too long, the narrative changes. Strategic becomes stalled. Selective becomes difficult. Intentional becomes forgotten. He knows this. That's why the pause isn't about retreat. It's about recalibration. He begins reading scripts again, but differently, not asking, is this big, but does this give me control? Not screen time, not billing, control over tone, over packing, over presence. He notices how many projects assume his constant availability, how many deals were structured around his willingness to say yes quickly. The short cue was a warning. This pause is a response. Inside the studio, the shift is subtle but measurable. Projects that once depended on his attachment stall, others are reworked, budgets move, calendars shift. No one admits it, but the system is learning something uncomfortable. It cannot fully replace him without cost. That realization doesn't restore the pause on set. But it changes the conversation. Because Hollywood's true currency isn't talent, it's optionality, the ability to choose, to delay, to say no without disappearing. By stepping back, he's forced the industry to confront its own dependency. This is where many stars fail. They blink. They return too fast, accept smaller cues as normal, trade long-term leverage for short-term reassurance. He doesn't. Instead, he waits. Weeks pass, then months. The absence becomes noticeable not to audiences but to decision makers. The system has adjusted but not cleanly, friction remains, something's missing. And that absence begins to feel heavier than his presence ever did. Because power doesn't always announce itself by arriving. Sometimes, it announces itself by not showing up. And when that happens, Hollywood has to decide. Does it adapt without you? Or does it make space for your return? That question is about to be answered. February 12, 1999, 8:03 a.m. The same studio lot, a different energy. The call sheet has been revised. Not dramatically, not publicly, but deliberately. His name is still where it was before, but the timing around it has changed. The schedule breathes again, scenes are clustered differently, meetings are spaced wider. Time has been returned. This is how reversals happen in Hollywood, not through apologies, through logistics. The walk-on cue returns not fully, not ceremonially, but enough to be felt. The music swells longer than it has in months. The assistant director pauses before calling action, just a fraction of a second. Everyone notices. No one comments. The studio never admits it tested him, he never admits he noticed. That mutual silence is the agreement. What changed wasn't his performance, it wasn't public perception, it was his relationship to urgency. By refusing to rush back into visibility, he forced the system to confront its own impatience. The studio realized something it rarely likes to acknowledge: some stars don't lose power when they slow down. They gain it. Industry-wise, this moment reshapes how he is handled, not indulged, but respected differently. Projects are brought to him earlier, not later. Discussions include tone, not just numbers. His input is requested before decisions harden. That's influence. And it comes not from dominance, but from restraint. You can feel the shift in the room. Younger actors watch him differently now, not as someone fighting to stay relevant, but as someone who controls his distance. That kind of authority can't be taught, it can only be demonstrated. The emotional core of this reversal isn't triumph. It's clarity. He understands now that Hollywood power isn't about how loudly you arrive, it's about whether the room still rearranges itself when you choose to return. The shortened cue was never the threat. It was the signal. The real test was what he did next. By pausing instead of pleading, by withholding instead of demanding, he reframed the equation. The studio learned that compressing him too far didn't make the machine smoother, it made it unstable. That's the risk Hollywood takes when it tries to manage people like processes. Some people become smaller. Others become essential. As cameras roll again, the star steps onto the stage. The pause is there. The rhythm holds, not because it was restored, but because it was renegotiated. And this time, the silence before action isn't just ritual. It's acknowledgement. He doesn't stay long after wrap, he doesn't linger for reassurance, he leaves on his own timing now. That's the difference. Because power that must be constantly affirmed isn't power at all. Real power survives absence. And Hollywood, reluctantly, has just been reminded of that.